Vaughn. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast.
Hello, Kalika. I am so happy to finally be here. I know we've been talking about it for a while, so we finally made it happen.
Yay, so exciting. For everyone who's listening, today we have Lai-DuMone. She is the founder of Worksmart Advantage. She helps companies minimize turnover through team and leadership development and creativity. She also has an incredible TED Talk and got her MBA. Where'd you get your MBA from?
I went to Pepperdine University up in Malibu.
Ah, so fancy.
It was
Welcome.
lovely. I think I chose it because it was by the beach, just like I chose my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara.
Well, you definitely look like you're sun-kissed and yeah, and anyone who I think enjoys the ocean is okay with me.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you become the founder of WorkSmart Advantage?
So I started this business about 6 years ago, and it had been on my mind for probably 12 years. And it was this whole concept of like just using creativity for personal and professional development. And it really came up because I was working in the corporate after I got my MBA. I just dove into this corporate environment and several different corporate environments. And what I found was lacking in my life was these creative outlets. So when I very first started my business, it was not called WorkSmart. It was called Craftivity Events. And what I did was I had like these creative activities, creative events in my backyard for my friends and invite people and also try to bring those same type of creative activities into the workplace. And what I found is that corporations weren't buying this idea of me coming into their place of work and bring my arts and craft supplies to play with their people. It didn't seem like a good use of time. I thought they were wrong, but what I realized in running that business was that I needed to package what I was selling in a way that made sense for them, in a way that would bring them value. So that's when I hunkered down. I rebranded as WorkSmart, and then I tied those same creative activities into business results, or business training, team development, leadership training. Now, it's team development, leadership training, all through the lens of what I call now creative integration, which basically means we do all that type of training with creativity, play, and experiential learning. And what I used to call creative art projects, I now call creative artifacts. And with the change in the name of my company, the change in the focus of what I do, and the change in that name of creative activity to creative artifacts, it's been phenomenally much better and
At getting
much more well
clients,
received. Yeah,
right? Yeah, because I think that you're absolutely right. I think that people need to be able to understand in their language what
that's
you're
right.
doing.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I still find with the work I'm doing, there's still education around it. Like, why is creativity good for business? Why should I do leadership training through creativity? So there is still a level of need for education around creativity, but I am finding that it's a lot easier for me to express the importance of creativity in that sense of, well, we're all creative. Good ideas can come from any level of your organization. And when you teach through creativity, you're tapping into a capacity that every single person on your team has. And it leads to engagement and retention. And that sounds a lot better than like, oh, I'm gonna bring in art supplies and we're just gonna sit and play.
Which there's nothing wrong with play because that's when we get the best ideas.
That's right. That's right. And that's what we are. Like, once I get in there, that is what we're doing, but is languaging in a way that makes sense for them, like you said.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting? I find that the companies that are the most creative, the most purposeful are the ones who spend time in helping their employees thrive and flourish in and unlock this creativity potential in their workforce. And a lot of people
Absolutely.
aren't really.
You think about 3M, they're always reinventing, inventing new things, and they are a company that specifically gives people time every week to just think and create.
Google does that too, I heard as well.
Okay, got it.
Right? Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
Yeah, like apparently the 20% of their work hours can be spent on any type of creative product and
I
any
love that.
creative project that they have their mind in. So you have your MBA. When did you know, because most MBAs that I know, people who've gone through getting their master's in business administration,
Hmm.
say that they're not creative. When did you know that you were creative?
I have always been creative. The MBA was a fluke, similar to most of my life is a fluke. I I had graduated from college and I thought I was gonna be a chiropractor or a physical therapist. So I started working for a chiropractor and a physical therapist just to see what if I liked the field. And I liked it well enough. I got into chiropractic school up in Portland, and it was about 2 weeks before leaving for college up in Portland to chiropractic school that I thought to myself, if I go and do this, like I'm a chiropractor. Like that's what I'm going to school to be a chiropractor. And I remember leaving work one day at the physical therapist office I worked at, and there was an ad on the radio for Pepperdine MBA. So I went home and applied and took my GMAT. And I think within that next 9 months, a year, whatever it was, I was driving up the coast to Malibu to get my MBA. So there wasn't, and my thought around that was like, well, I'm gonna get a master's degree. I could become a chiropractor, go to chiropractic school, and become a chiropractor, or I can go get this MBA and go into all sorts of different areas. And so that's what I did. And I will say like I was very out of place there. A lot back then when people were going to business school, everyone was going to investment banking or accounting or something like that. And I never had those ideas for myself. It was just getting my MBA to have another tool in my belt.
So when you were younger, like, because we both have kids, like, did your parents see this creativity in you and encourage that? Well, I guess not because we're both Asian.
Yeah. Like
Like,
realistically, no, not at all.
they want you to become an accountant or an investment banker for sure.
That's right. That's right. So I've always been creative my whole life. I would not say it was encouraged. It was encouraged in the sense that if I was bored at home and bugging my mom, she would say like, "Let me show you how to draw this or paint this," just to keep me occupied. But the conversation was never around like to do this for a living or to study creativity or study art. I have a brother and a sister. We are Vietnamese refugees. We were raised in a very traditional Vietnamese household and Asian household. And one of us was supposed to be a doctor, one of us was supposed to be a lawyer, and the other one was supposed to be an engineer. None of us are any of those three. So I wouldn't say it was nurtured in my childhood, but it was around because my mom was really creative too. But I don't think it was ever no one ever took it seriously that art creativity would be anywhere near an option for a career.
And can you imagine if there really was a career like entrepreneur, founder of Worksmart Advantage? You probably would have signed up for that, but this is something that you created on your own. You saw a
It
need.
is. And I will have to say, like, in hindsight, going back through, because I had a lot of like regret, almost anger too towards my parents, or just like blame towards them. I was like, oh, I did all these things because I was told to, right? And I felt like I had to, even getting the MBA, even though my reasoning was either chiropractic school or an MBA. I was like, but why did I think I had to do either of them, right? Getting corporate jobs, getting promoted. There's all these things that happened in my life and all these choices I made that at the time, like, oh my gosh, I didn't make these choices for myself. I made them because of someone else's expectation. So I held a lot of blame towards how I was raised for that. But once I started this business and saw the in shift and success in the business, once I changed the work smart, had these very specific outcomes for the work I do, I look back and I'm like, oh, every single place I was and every single thing I did has led up to this, right? It would be very different for me to try to do the work I do if I was raised as an artist and I was a visual artist trying to go into these businesses, teaching them leadership training through creativity. I think it works because I do have the background I have.
Yes, and they also respect that. They respect that you
Yeah,
have your MBA.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like I'm an
you've
MBA
based.
that happens to be creative, right? Versus a creative that's trying to learn about business and teach you about business skills.
Yeah, it is so impressive. So I know that you did a workshop for us, and I found it so wonderful because, as a creative myself, I own a design digital agency, I thought how you coax this creativity out from the participants was so beautiful. Can you share one of the exercises that you do?
Sure. So the way I use creativity is this idea that when you incorporate creativity into teaching and learning, what you're able to do is open up people's perspectives, right? So if I sit here and just ask you a question, you will think and your analytical brain will start, the synapses will start going and you'll give me an answer. But rather than doing that, I might say like, oh, Kalika, tell me a little bit about yourself, but why don't you look at these images and tell me what characteristics of these images remind you of some personal values you have, right? And that, for some reason, allows people to come up with more ideas, number one, and then share more freely. And that's what we really need in the workplace is for people to be freely sharing ideas so that innovation can happen and collaboration can happen.
I know the word that everyone uses is psychological safety,
Safety, right?
right? Because sometimes people, especially if they're women of color or people of color, indigenous, they may not have much of, I don't know, they may not feel like they have a voice. And when you have these creative workshops for businesses, it makes people, put their guard down and lets their brain grow and flourish with
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah, and you're literally tapping into physically tapping into areas of your brain that we don't generally tap into in the corporate environment, right? The corporate environment is geared for analytical, what was formerly called like left brain thinking, and what creativity does, it brings in right brain thinking. So you're using bilateral thinking, and it just makes sense, right? It just makes sense to use both hemispheres of your brain at work than just one.
And how have the companies that you've worked with thrived?
I think there's so many different ways. So it's like psychological safety is definitely one of the ways, right? This idea where you were creating this space where people feel safe to share ideas and they feel that their ideas are being heard. And that is something that I talk about a lot in the workshops I do and in the environments I work in, is that what creativity does is it levels the playing field. I use this example a lot. You may have heard me say it before, I'm not sure. But when you're, and I am one of these people, like when you're in a corporate environment, if you're in a boardroom meeting and the person leading the meeting asks a question, here's our challenge. Who has an idea to solve this challenge? Let's brainstorm. You may hear, let's say there's 10 people in the room. Three people are going to have all the answers and they're going to continue to talk, where the rest of us, including me, I'm going to sit there with my ideas in my head, ruminating on how I should say this. When should I say this? Is this a good idea? Will people make fun of me if I say this? Well, will I offend someone? Like I'm just like thinking, thinking, thinking. And that idea is never going to get out of my head. So you really, when you do it that way, you're only catering to the people who are, you might want to use the word extroverted, who are comfortable speaking out loud. But when you bring in these creative tools, what you're doing is leveling the playing field so that everyone can have their ideas heard. So instead of someone sitting in the boardroom and saying, here's our challenge, who has an idea, let's brainstorm. How about we say, here's the challenge. I'm going to play classical music for 10 minutes. Write down all your ideas. Now pass your paper around and let's read off the ideas that are in front of you. Or here's, 7 pounds of Legos. Build your ideas and then share your ideas. So there's many ways that we can idea share and brainstorm that's not traditional to a regular workplace. And 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 in bringing those different modalities in, what I've seen the way that I've seen companies benefit is that more ideas are shared, and you are not only that, but you are creating that psychological safety.
And I think you're so right because as, Asian Pacific Islanders ourselves, we were taught to be quiet. And so we were trained to not say anything. And in other cultures, American culture, the more that you speak up, the more that you raise your hand, the more that you're praised for it. So you're absolutely right. Like how ideas are shared isn't really equal because of how we were brought up.
Yeah, exactly. So that whole idea of like diversity of thought, neurodiversity, creativity addresses all of that.
How exciting. So, what other? I think the one thing that you had us do was I think, get some Legos and create like a duck out of it or something like that. Was that one
Yeah.
of them?
Okay. So
Yeah.
that is an exercise. I do that exercise often, and I do that exercise as an opener for most of my workshops. Number one, to show people that you are creative, and to visualize this idea of diversity. So the exercise, whether you do it with Legos or you do it in a drawing, is I give people, if we have the supplies and people have agreed to supplies, I will send everyone 6 identical Lego bricks, red and yellow Lego bricks. And then I will have them take out the Lego bricks and I give them 1 minute to build a duck. After that, most things have been on, virtual on Zoom now. I ask everyone to share their duck into the screen. And we look and I just said, what do you notice? And what people will always notice is that none of the ducks are the same. And
None
I've done
of
this in a
them
room of
were
like,
the same.
none of them were the same. I've done this in a room full like of 250 people, and none of the ducks are the same. And what that speaks to, number one, is this idea like, okay, if you walked in this room and you thought to yourself, I'm not creative, well, guess what? You are. You just took 6, random pieces of Legos and built a duck. It also shows that you are a creative problem solver because your challenge was to build a duck and you took 6 random pieces of Lego and built a duck. And it speaks to diversity, right? We all had 6 identical building blocks and everyone built something different. And think about how many building blocks it took to make each and every single one of us, to bring each of us into this room. So it really sets the stage for this idea that every single person in here has a different perspective to share, different experiences that they've had in their lives to share, and everyone's voice matters.
This reminds me of this TED Talk that I saw called How to Solve a Wicked Problem. And the
Uh-huh.
one exercise was show me, if you want to solve a wicked problem, first show me how you make toast. And similar to the duck, everyone's drawing out their how to make toast. Every single one of them were different. Some people were
And it's
talking
making
about,
toast, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's making toast. Some people started from way back then, where you're basically making flour, like you're making the wheat, And then there's some people who students, like literally there's fire, and then there's a toast on a skewer on top of it.
I love
So,
that.
and then what he talks about is what you focus on shows a lot about your thinking, because a lot of times people were focused on the end result, the peanut butter and
Mm.
jelly. Some people were focused just on the toaster, and some people were
Oh,
focused on the plate. Like, it's so
yeah.
interesting.
It's so interesting. Yeah, and that does speak to exactly that speaks to like our diversity, our perspectives, and how everyone can look at one thing and see something completely different.
Completely different. So you also had a TED Talk. Tell us a little bit about the
Yes.
TED Talk.
So my TEDx talk was on it's on this idea and that I bring into my work which around following your curiosity. How when you follow your curiosity, when you take small steps, it leads to possibilities, right? You ask what if, just get curious by asking what if, take small steps, and then you lead to these new possibilities that you could not ever imagine. And it's based around the story of my mom. When I had mentioned a little bit earlier that we are refugees from Vietnam, we fled the day Saigon fell to the Communist Party in 1975. And our first home here was at Camp Pendleton Marine Base. After that, we were transferred to the first non-military refugee integration center in the United States. It was called Hope Village. And it was there where like volunteers came and flooded the camp and helped us. And there was one woman at the camp, a Hollywood movie star who volunteered. They named Tippi Hedren, and she just took to the women and she said, "I want to help them find a career." And she decided to start them on typing and sewing classes because both those careers were fairly easy to learn, easy to get into. But these 20 women, including my mom, were just so curious about her long red, Hollywood style manicured nails. And if you think about that, Kalika, you really think about that, like here they are typing and sewing, curious about her nails. Tippy could have said, "Thank you so much for the curiosity and for the compliment. Keep typing and sewing." But she didn't. She didn't just ignore it. She's like, "Huh, interesting. They're so curious about this. What if? Like, what if we could get them trained and licensed as manicurists?" And she took the first small step and invited her manicurists from LA up to Sacramento. Every weekend, she would fly her up there. And she taught these 20 women how to do a basic manicure. And they loved it. But you had to be licensed to be a manicurist in the United States, and you still do. So then Tippy just walked herself down to the local beauty school, Citrus Heights Beauty College. And she said, I know this is not the way it's generally done, right? I know this is not the way you guys do it, but I have these 20 women. They have no money. They don't speak English. They want to be manicurists. What can we do? And they said, we'll help them. So they all went down there, 400 hours schooling every single day for 10 weeks. And they learned English. They learned all the like the Juliet manicure, all the things that went on with nails back then. And within 10 weeks, they all passed their manicure practicum and written tests in English. And they were the first licensed Vietnamese manicurists in the United States. And clearly, that's not the end of the story. We all left Hope Village, sponsored by different families and churches. We were sponsored by a church here in Santa Monica, and Tippy came to our little one-bedroom apartment, drove my mom around until she found her first job at a little boutique called Bojack Beauty Salon. And my mom, that's how she got her start with the manicure industry. And it was the Vietnamese refugees and immigrants who came the years after us who just blew this industry up, right? They started opening their own
Yeah.
beauty salons, manufacturing their own supplies, opening their own beauty schools. We have a good friend whose mom opened a beauty school in Orange County, Tam Nguyen, who he runs it now. He's a family business now. And the manicure industry is now an $8.3 billion industry that so help support, Tippy's goal was like, I want to help these 20 women support their families. And what she did, what she couldn't see is that she would help hundreds of thousands of families and, support, 100,000 families support themselves and start a new life in their country. But you look at the second generation, like me, right? I had the opportunity to get my MBA. I had the opportunity to start my own business. My kid will never know, like my kid will have it better than me. And we taught it's just so amazing what one act of kindness could do.
Yeah, and for everyone who doesn't know, Tippi Hedren, she's famous for Albert Hitchcock's The Birds. So she
That's
could have
right.
been doing so many other things. But here with
Yeah.
such a big heart. And back then, this was in the 70s. Is that right?
Yes,
Was this in the
70.
70s?
Yep. Yep, 75.
Yeah, I mean, in the mid 70s, someone, powerful like her used her power to be able to help women. And what a wonderful thing to recognize, especially as we're celebrating Women's History Month in March.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if people are listening and don't know who Tippi Hedren is, she was much more than a movie star, right? She helped my family, she helped all these women. There's another story about a famous Vietnamese actress who was, she was stuck in Vietnam, finally was able to get to Canada, but her family was here in the United States. But she knew everyone, right? She called everyone she knew in Hollywood to help her, and no one helped her. And then she's like, "Well, my last chance is Tippi Hedren," and she had interviewed Tippi Hedren one time, and didn't know each other, weren't friends. And she called Tippi, and with like the way she says, like at a payphone with coins, like her last coins, saying, "I'm stuck up here. I'm trying to immigrate to the United States, but I need a sponsor." Without hesitation, Tippi said, "Come here, come down. I'll sponsor you." And she let her live with her, wore her clothes, just completely supported her and to get her back on her feet. So when you talk
Wow.
about like empowering women and act and as an act, not just as in stating it, like she was way ahead of the curve.
I mean, really, I mean, if we had her here now, it's just wow, well, and she got us the start, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
it became a domino effect, it became it's such a beautiful, beautiful start to what we're seeing today in Hollywood, in business. We definitely are seeing a lot more. We still have a long way to go, but for sure, like amazing to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a beautiful story, and we're so grateful to her.
Yeah. So it was your mom that really helped you inspire. So it was her curiosity, it was her courage that helped you inspire you to start your career.
Yeah, and I didn't really know that, right? Like it was always like us against them, right? Because our cultures were so different growing up that it always seemed in my family like the kids against the parents because they're so strict and they will let us do anything. And it wasn't until well into adulthood that I realized like, oh, the lessons I learned from my parents were not what they said, but what they did, what I watched them doing. And what I watched them doing was follow their curiosity every day based and work hard, right? But follow their curiosity based on necessity. not not interest. And I am fortunate enough now to be able to follow my curiosity based on interest. So when I say that, I mean, like, my mom would be like, okay, well, I need more supplies for my nail business, but I can't afford what they're selling at the stores. So let's get on the bus, kids, and go to the hardware store and buy sticks of wood and sandpaper and glue, and we'll go home and make nail files, right? So like things like that I just saw her do on a daily basis that clearly inspired me to just continue to look at things in a different way creatively, get curious about how else I could do things, ask what if, and then take these small steps to get it done.
That is so inspiring. No wonder you like arts and crafts.
Yeah, exactly. So true.
And she
It's
used it to solve a problem.
and to use it to solve a problem. So it wasn't until well into, I think it was like really in doing my TEDx talk that I recognized, like, oh my gosh, like my business, my work that I do in curiosity and creativity, that didn't come out of thin air, right? And that wasn't a rebellious move. Like that was what I saw all growing up. And it really was an inspiration from my mom.
Yeah, I know. It was such huge inspiration. And I'm sure that now we're seeing all the chaos that's happening in the Ukraine, and with the refugees moving into other different countries. What are you experiencing when you see that?
Well, I would say like with Ukraine, recently with Afghanistan, a couple really powerful things. Number one, all my life, I always told that refugee story as my parents' story, right? Like my parents fled Vietnam, my parents did all this, which they did, and I had to reflect on like, and I was there, right? I was a 2-year-old child who absorbed all of that. And it really, I mean, it kind of came up a few years ago in a meditation retreat I went on. The woman running the retreat, she's like, "You tell your story like it's not yours." I was like, "Well, it's my parents' story." She's like, "No, you need to own that, right? It lives in your body." And then seeing images from Afghanistan of these families fleeing their country, and seeing these small children the same age I was, 2 years old, clinging to their parents, and you can see the fear in their eyes. And it struck me as like, oh, that's who I was, and I've only started really reflecting on like what was that experience for me as a 2-year-old, even though I couldn't verbalize my feelings, like this idea that trauma lives in your body, and how can you release that? How can you work on healing yourself, even though you don't have conscious memory? So that's one thing that came up for me. And then the other thing is this idea of it, because especially with what's going on in Ukraine, what happened in Afghanistan, there's a lot of pain around it. There's a lot of struggle, people looking at it through very rightfully so negative lens of like, oh my gosh, this is like so painful to watch, and I can't believe this is happening. But with a 40 plus year view, like hindsight, I also think of the possibilities that are going to happen from this too, right? Yes, there's a lot of suffering now. A lot of people will suffer. A lot of people will continue to suffer. There's going to be some very tragic stories that come from this, but there's also going to be a lot of miracles and amazing things that come from this as well.
Yeah, the human spirit, the resilience, the power just to want to survive, not only want to, but the will to survive.
Yeah,
I think is so
absolutely.
important. Yeah. One of my
Absolutely.
friends, Liz Arch, she was on the podcast earlier. She was telling me about this one time when she was 5, and she
Hmm.
grew up in Hawaii, and I think it was Kauai, and her entire home was flooded. And so she remembers at 5 years old, her dad carrying her, and she was, I think, on top of the roof of her car. The dad was putting her on the roof of her car as she watched her the
Oh my,
furniture go, and
oh
she
my
said
goodness.
similar to yours, where she didn't really, she was just, it wasn't her story. And then when she started really owning it, she realized that she would have these traumatic things happen seasonally, because I think it
Mm,
happened in January. I think it was like New Year's or something like that. And so every single time, because she didn't process it, subconsciously, in January, some crazy thing would happen to her. Isn't that
yeah,
interesting? That's
it's very
interesting, right?
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is interesting, and I absolutely believe it. What you might know what this book is, like your body. Keep Score. I think that's called. I
Yes,
haven't
yes,
read it yet.
Peter. Yeah, it's such a great book. I forgot who
Yeah,
wrote it,
I have to
but
read
yeah,
that.
yeah. I think that, yeah, we store it. And then as she was talking about, there's big T trauma and little T trauma.
Right.
But if you don't even recognize that it's trauma, then how are you going to work through it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, I mean, this gets into like I mean, if you're doing better than your parents did, which in terms of like your life experience, it's hard to own that trauma because I've always lived my life thinking like, well, whatever happens to me is like, well, it's better than what happened to my parents, right? And I have it better than my parents. So you almost dismissing anything bad that's happened to me in comparison. And we all know, when you compare, you really diminish everyone's experience. So being able to own your trauma, small t, big T, whatever it is, and realizing if like that is your experience, regardless of anyone else's.
Yeah. So comparison, the monkey mind checklist, it's like number 8 or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things with our monkey mind is a term, a Buddhist term that your brain goes from fear and doubt, and
Mm,
it's wonderful that you can you recognize it. That you're comparing. Well, it wasn't as bad as that.
right.
But we say those types of things so that we ourselves can survive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it's great that you know how to reframe experiences for in a positive way, because we need to hear and see more of that.
Well, yeah, and learning too, right? It's always a process, and I always need my reminders. And I think my child is a reminder for me, right? It's
Yeah.
like this idea that you don't want to carry over things and pass it on to the next generation. I was listening to this is a while back now, an Oprah Winfrey Super Soul Sundays podcast, and she was talking to Dr. I forgot her first name, Dr. Shafali, but she's like a child and parent psychologist, and she said one. I mean, the whole podcast was amazing, but one statement she made still I carry all the time. She said a parent's subconscious is the air your child breathes.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, let's not let there be too much in that subconscious that's negative then, because I mean, I believe that's true. Like our unconscious behavior is like these children pick up all that energy.
Yeah, something happened to my daughter a couple of weeks ago. There were a whole bunch of kids that didn't invite her to the mall. She has a group of 11
Mm,
friends, and when that happened, I was so upset because as a mom, like you empathize, and then realizing like, gosh, I'm probably even more upset than she is. No, she was crying in her bed, obviously. And then I started looking at her as a hero, whole and complete,
mm,
someone who can take it. And so when I went to her bedroom to talk to her about it, and just said, you can change this. You can ask who created this event. You can find out more. And she's like, no, I don't want to. But you're absolutely right. Like when I started looking at her lens, like, oh, poor her, you know
right.
she
Yeah.
will take that on. But if you start looking at them like, you can do this, you're resilient,
Yes.
everything. And it's subconscious. Like I wasn't really saying like, oh, you're resilient, but just the feeling that you can handle this, we can do hard things, is something that we definitely pass on. Yeah.
Yes. I really am trying to pass those type of lessons on to Nika. Like and the fact like like when you think about like our history, your family's history, my family's history is like, yeah, like it's not just a saying that we're resilient and relentless. And I tell you all the time, we come from a history of relentless, resilient people, and that's what's in our blood.
Yeah. And how does he take it?
He's like, my poor little guy. He's like, well, why am I so scared of everything? He's a nervous one. But he was just like me when I was little. Like if you knew me as a 5 to 8 year old child, like you would never imagine I'd be sitting here talking to you, standing on stage doing a TEDx talk. None of it. There's no way.
Oh, you're a public speaker. you
Yes.
your clients are Google and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You would have been
Yes.
no
So
way.
no, not a chance. I was so shy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of social anxiety. I mean, and again, it's like I didn't no one called it social anxiety at the time, but that like when I in retrospect, like what I would do is like I didn't want to leave the house ever. I didn't let my parents leave the house ever. They would want to go on a movie date. I would sit at the front door crying and tell them not to go because something bad's gonna happen. And we talk about like, oh yeah, it was my parents' story that the whole refugee thing. But you see, even as a 5-year old, how that was represented in my behavior.
How did you move beyond that? Because we're I guess are you still considered Gen X? You're too young. And we never had those
No, am I? No, I'm
resources.
Gen X. Yeah. Oh no, yeah,
We
we didn't have those resources for sure. We didn't.
and that's why we just sort of like buckled up and just like we dealt with it. How
Yeah.
did you how did you transform?
That's such an interesting question. I don't even think I've ever reflected on when exactly that transformation happened. I will have to say there were like, even in elementary school into junior high, I mean, if I have to give credit, it might be to the all girls Catholic school I went to.
Yeah.
Once I was in high school, I went to an all girls Catholic school,
Yeah.
and there was like we all just spoke out. We all had our ideas. We all spoke out. There was no hiding. There was no hiding
No
behind like
hierarchy.
these. Yeah, no hierarchy, none of this like male aggression there that
Right.
was like, oh, I can't talk because he's talking or being talked over like that. And I think that's where I learned that, and I just carried on to college and beyond. So interesting, Kaliki. You really had me make a revelation there because when I think back of like when did I start using my voice, it would have had to be in high school. And I will
And
say, like, I know, I mean, again, like I said, we can talk about anything here. And I will have to say, I think it was around the same time, junior high or high school, where there was an incident, and it wasn't terror. I mean, I shouldn't like let me just take that part back. But I was verbally sexually harassed as probably like a 11 or 12-year-old girl in church, by the way, right?
in
And my
church,
reaction in church, and my reaction was to stay quiet, right? But after that, I was like, that will never happen again. Like that will never happen again. The idea that I did not use my voice in a situation to protect myself like that, I made a decision right there and then that will never
oh
happen again.
no.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Trust me, people have paid the price.
now they know.
Yes.
You got some good practice in.
Oh yeah. Yes. So
Yeah.
yes, I think going to an all girls Catholic high school where we were encouraged to speak up and understand, to empower one another, empower ourselves. And that one instance I can pinpoint and be like, I really recall going like, well, that's not gonna happen. I don't like the way that felt. And I'm not gonna stay quiet anymore.
Yeah. And now thinking back, I'm wondering whether or not transform is really the right word. Maybe it's just remembering who you really are, Like maybe who you are
Yeah.
right now is really the original you, and the other layers that you took on, fleeing
Mm,
Vietnam with your parents, and it's just sort of like shedding
that's
that
interesting.
layer,
Yeah.
you know.
That's an interesting perspective too, because I would say that my mom would say like I am now who I was originally
Yeah.
as a baby, right? Like
Yeah.
really out like adventurous and like she tells me stories like she would put me in my crib and come back and be like I'd be gone. Like where is this girl? I always
Where
put me in
did
her
she
crib and
go?
now she's gone.
Oh,
And we would go around
escape
the house and
artist.
find me in random places. Yeah.
Oh, you found a creative way to escape.
That's right. That's right. So creativity is always there.
Oh my gosh. So, what are you looking forward to in 2022?
This year seems so interesting to me. I feel like I'm at a place in my career and in my life where I'm looking for both stability and change, right? So in terms of stability, like my work, I love what I do, and I'm I mean, I'm finally at a place in my life where starting this business just like this feels right. I look back at a lot of things I did, and as I said before, it was for other people. This is clearly for me and the right place for me to be. And that's why I keep going. There's definitely been over the last 6 years like struggles of is this gonna work? Like, is this bringing value? But I remember hearing when I first started my business is businesses succeed when you start and keep going. And that's what I always keep telling them, start and keep going, start and keep going. And and I mean, it wouldn't really be well advised to keep going if you're getting negative feedback, if you didn't see it didn't seem to be working, but it is working. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on the work I do. So that's what really drives me to keep going. And I'm over the last couple of years seeing some real success with the business as well. So continuing to, for me, the stability is continuing to grow Worksmart. We have brought up a little bit before. Through my work, I've met some amazing people and have had some amazing collaborations and opportunities. One of them is with an organization I started volunteering for down in San Diego called the Honor Foundation. And they are an organization that works with special force operators, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, to transition from military career to civilian career. So I started bringing my creative activities to that work. And in that, I met a gentleman named Joe Lerner who coaches for them. And we've now started a project together, a company together called True Cycle Coaching, where he really brings in the coaching methodologies and I bring in the creativity. So be able to combine those two things. And I know you built this or you designed us an amazing logo and branding. Thank you so much.
You're the
But
best.
you're the best. Joe and I talk about that all the time. We're like, we love how Kalika calls us the
You are.
best. so, so, so I think in this next stage of 2022 is finding collaborations like that make sense and that come so naturally, right? And I'm not like seeking. I'm such a doer that I'm generally like pushing, pushing, pushing. What's next? Driving things to happen for myself and my business. But what I found is in doing what you love, giving back, finding yourself in places and situations that just make sense to you, these natural collaborations and opportunities arise. So that's what I'm looking forward to in 2022. It's like just kind of like this whole idea, like let's just get curious and see what's next. Like what if I do this, whatever it is. I'll tell you. Like I know I'm just rambling on, but I'll tell you another thing where I was on Instagram and I was scrolling through, and this this post came up from an organization called SUP Vets, Stand Up Paddle Avoiding Vets. So I click on it. They are another nonprofit, and they take veterans free of charge down to Punta Mita, Mexico, to learn how to paddleboard surf.
Wow.
And and because of what I learned from my mom and Tippy's experience, rather than just continue to scroll, I clicked on message and I said, I work with veterans. I love Mexico. I paddleboard. I would love to connect with you. And we did. And I met with the founder in San Diego one time when I was down there. We haven't come up with a natural collaboration, but I just feel like that's coming in the future. And one day you will see a post of me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, where I'm paddleboarding with veterans in Punta Mita, Mexico.
That just gives me goosebumps. Like electricity is just running through my body
Oh,
just listening to that, that you were willing, because I really do believe that our greatest power is to be willing, even before being courageous, even before being brave. You were willing to just be open, to
yes,
possibility. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the openness to possibility is like that clearly leads to new opportunities, and you just never know what might come into your life.
Yeah. I've been reading this book by David R. Hawkins called Power versus Force. And he talks about these
Mm,
different qualities and how they are sometimes juxtaposed. And what reminded about what you said earlier is, instead of just sort of seeking it, he says that there's a difference between receiving and grasping,
ooh, oh yes. That
right?
speaks to me, Kalika. Yes.
Right? Like I'm
That
here,
completely speaks to me.
I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to receive hints from the universe, possible collaborations. I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, well, because there's two planes, right? There's two planes. There's the competitive plane, right? And then there's the creativity plane, which you live in, where there's infinite possibilities. And when you're in the competitive field, that's when you're grasping because there's not enough.
Mm,
Let me just elbow
yeah.
this person out of the way. But when you move higher, in vibration or in energy, that's when you start
Yes.
receiving, and it's always there for you.
Oh,
So
I love that.
if someone wants to collaborate with you, how
Yes.
can they get in touch with you?
Message me on
And
Instagram, clearly. Just kidding.
and would be a great collaboration?
So, okay, I'm gonna go back to that receiving thing because I'll tell you why
Yeah,
it speaks so much to me.
yeah,
Because even though I am a creative, I had to learn to be this way, to receive and to because I am also, kind of like a driver. Like I like to get things done. I like to do things rather than just be.
yeah.
And I to the point where like especially the first few years of my business, just really driving my business forward. And I had a business coach at that time who said to me, what you're doing is you're telling the universe that you don't need anything, right? You're
Yeah.
telling all this doing is telling the universe like you have everything you need. And what she's like, what I suggest you do is spend the work, with the work hours you need to get things done for the day, but then stop because I was working like 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. And she's like, and just limit yourself and then just stop and make room to receive, and the universe will answer you, and it certainly has.
Have you read the book Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles?
No, no. I love your
So
book recommendations. I write that one down.
that book, in one of the chapters, it talks about doing today's work today,
Mm,
being excellent today. But don't do tomorrow's work today. Do today's work in the most excellent way you can today.
ooh, I
So
like that.
crazy, right? It's good, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, if you are going to
Um,
read it, I would recommend chapter 4, chapter
okay. Oh
7,
my gosh. Yeah,
chapter
you
11,
know
and
exactly.
chapter 14. So
Four,
anyone else?
7, 11, and 14. Oh my God, I can't believe you have that
Yes.
memorized. Okay, good to know.
4 talks about thought, because you can
Uh-huh.
impress whatever you want into the original substance that's out there. Chapter 7 talks about gratitude.
Mm,
Chapter 11 talks about the way you have to act, which is, a lot of times people think that they're like, oh, well, I don't like the job that I'm in. I don't like the business I'm in. Like when I have my next business, I'm going to, no, no, no. You have to act today. And then the final one, number in chapter 14, is always give the impression of increase to someone. So if like for instance with you, Vaughn, I'm just like, Vaughn, you're gonna be rich. Like you're a badass. It just basically
that's
saying,
awesome.
and without even saying it out loud, you're talking about the subconscious. That's
Yes.
the subconscious that I'm always giving to people in the back of my mind, like, you are so successful right now. You're just
Oh, I
great.
love that. That's
Yeah.
great. Oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you. You're like when we talk about women empower women, like I definitely put you at the top of my list for someone who does that. And you never expect anything back. You're just always giving and so supportive, so supportive. I really appreciate that.
And likewise, you too. I mean, you're always the first person to connect people to people. You're so giving, like you're so generous with your time and with everything that you have. Like, thank you so much for also supporting my daughter's business. Vaughn
Oh,
was probably
oh
like
my cookies.
our
Speaking
best,
of,
our best client. She kept on like ordering it for her friends. So thank you so much. You were just
of
so
course.
kind and just so lovely.
Oh,
Hey, I have
yeah,
another
I mean,
question.
yes,
Good.
go ahead. I
So,
was gonna say, of course, we have to support each other's businesses, right? And yeah, and it's a woman, a girl-owned business, and and the idea of like having our children feel confident and be confident in their ability to do things. I think that's so important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the first step to business is selling a product to a stranger. So thank you for giving them the
Of
opportunity.
course.
Yeah. So I know one of the things that you're very I mean, you have a lot of great habits. So what type of habits help you succeed as an entrepreneur?
So I think having a morning routine has really helped me to focus. So my morning routine is not. I wake up and I listen to this 7 minute podcast. It's called 7 Good Minutes, and it's quick, right? It's just seven. It's someone I forgot his name, but he plays he plays other people's talks that are 7 minutes long. He pulls out the good pieces of it, and it's just something that inspires me in the morning. And then I do a little bit. I know you have Peloton too. I'm not hardly ever on the Peloton, but I use the Peloton app to do some exercises. I'll do that. Then I might just lay there and just do some like quiet breathing for a few minutes before I get my day started. And then also and that's sort of like mindset stuff. And the other habit I've started doing over the last year is starting my day the night before, right? So I'm not waking up thinking like, what am I going to do tomorrow? Like I look at my schedule the night before. I'm like, okay, what needs to be done, and identify the top three things, like you were saying, what needs to be done tomorrow, and then making a list underneath that of like what would be nice to do, right? What else would be nice to do, and clear all my appointments, and then being okay. And this goes back to that whole idea of leaving room to receive, being okay with like I got the top three things done, right? And that's a successful day. If I get some of the other things done, great. But if I have those top three things done, I can be done with my day.
I love that. I love the idea of planning the day before. I mean, or the evening before. Is it the evening before?
The evening before, yes. Yeah.
It is so smart because then you're like, oh, do I really want to do that? Is that really on my schedule? Can I move that out?
Yeah.
Have you
Right.
ever seen these productivity sheets from Intelligent
No.
Change? So anyway, I love these
No.
productivity sheets. You know why? Because it only lets you do like one, literally, like, do you see this? It says like one thing. It's
Okay,
like
okay,
one thing, like
uh-huh.
the most important tasks for the day, the secondary, and then additional. Like literally, because usually my to-do list is like
Oh
20
my
things
God, so
long,
long.
and
Yeah.
it makes you really think like, what is the most important thing I need to do today? And it's hard to fill this thing out, just like, and then I'm writing the back, like, but I want to do 25 things. I don't want to
I
just do
know, I
one.
know.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
we're similar in that way. So we'll keep ourselves accountable to doing the one thing.
yeah. Which makes a huge difference because oftentimes we're always, there's such a huge difference between productivity and busyness. Like
Hmm.
we like being, and another thing that I do, which I'm just like, I really have to stop doing is like, if there's like a moment in my day, it's like a half an hour or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I want to fill it, like right before
Oh yeah.
like right before this podcast, I jumped on the Peloton because I had a half an hour, like why couldn't I just have just sat there?
Sit. Yeah.
No, I'm going to
Well,
jump on the phone.
well, besides the morning routine and the planning my day, the evening ahead, what I implemented last year only lasted a week. I really want to start implementing again now, starting maybe right now after this, is a nap a day.
Mm,
Because I mean, I'll tell you, when I was doing it, it was like 20-minute naps, 25-minute naps. It just refreshed me for the rest of the
yeah,
day.
yeah. So what time would you do it?
I'm gonna go do it right now.
Yeah, okay. It's two
I would
o'clock.
say like after lunch, like 1:30. I used to, I mean, I was doing it when I was doing it before, but I think that's good though, that you're not like, that's around like after lunchtime, you're a little tired anyway, and just
Yes.
refresh yourself for the rest of your day.
Yeah, and the fact that you can also realize that and you give yourself that room, like John F. Kennedy would take naps. I mean, many top leaders take naps because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It just boosts. And for me, it's doing meditation, which as soon as you meditate for about 20 minutes, like you're back up again,
Yeah.
and the pranayama breathing. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me. You're just awesome. You know that?
Oh, it's always a joy to spend time. And can we just I want to just tell people how we met? Is that
Yes.
okay?
Go
Uh,
ahead.
so when I very first started my business, I was like, I need a website, and I reached out to you. I don't even know how I found you. First, like Googling like website designers in Santa Monica or something, like branding agencies in Santa Monica, and I found you. You quickly responded to me and sent me like a proposal. But I was a new business. I'm like, I can't. It's not within my budget right now to work with you. And I didn't expect to hear back from you, but you wrote back right away, and you were so kind. And even though you knew you weren't getting any money from me, you weren't gonna be working with me. Your response, like anything I can do to help you, let me know. Um, and it just stuck with me. And then when I
No.
went to rebrand about 3 years ago, it was not even a choice who I was going to. I reached out to you right away. And I'm so glad we did, because we built this beautiful friendship, and I'm just so grateful to have you in my life.
And again, electricity is going through my mind. Like, thank
Oh,
you so much. That really touched me. And I absolutely remember you. And I remember our first initial meeting. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, it was just so nice to be in touch with you again and just to see you succeeding and see you working with, huge Fortune 100 clients like Google and LinkedIn now. And creativity really makes a huge difference. So anyone who needs, a boost of creativity, please reach out to Yvonne and connect with her, because she will definitely help revitalize your business.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Felicia. Thank you
much.
for having me.
You're the best.
And I'll see you soon. I'll talk to you soon. You're the best.
Yes, hopefully soon. In person, okay? In person.
Yes, I would love that.
Thank you.